Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to unpack the story of King Solomon. You know, the wisest guy ever, but his life takes a turn you might not see coming.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be looking at excerpts from a Bible study lesson on the Book of Kings to see how Solomon's reign, even though it started out amazingly, ultimately hit some major turbulence.
It's a story that's fascinating on so many levels. Intrigue, power, wisdom.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a cautionary tale about that slippery slope of compromise.
Right, so let's set the scene. Solomon inherits this kingdom that's at its absolute peak. We're talking land stretching all the way from the Euphrates River to Egypt.
Wow.
Unbelievable prosperity and a legacy of peace thanks to his dad, King David. What a way to start your rule, right? But here's where I find things get really thought-provoking. God appears to Solomon and says, ask for anything you want. Now, if you were in Solomon's shoes, what would you choose?
That's a good question. It's a question that reveals a lot about human nature, isn't it? History is full of leaders who would jumped at the chance for more power, wealth, military dominance, the usual suspects.
Right.
But Solomon, he asks for wisdom. Specifically, he asks for the wisdom to govern his people fairly and lead them well.
I'm struck by the parallel to the Garden of Eden story. Both situations presented a choice that really reveals character. It makes you think about the choices we face in our own lives and what they say about our priorities.
Absolutely. That choice speaks volumes about Solomon's values right from the start. And God, clearly impressed by this request, grants him wisdom beyond measure. Solomon becomes famous throughout the ancient world for his wisdom. You could say he was the original influencer. People traveled from distant lands just to witness his wisdom firsthand.
Like the Queen of Sheba, who journeyed 1,200 miles. I mean, that's like traveling across a continent in those days.
Yeah.
It really makes you realize the power of a good reputation. It makes me wonder, what kind of reputation are we building with our own choices today?
That's a great question to ponder. And Solomon's wisdom wasn't just something he kept to himself. He was also incredibly prolific in writing. He authored over 3,000 proverbs and 1,000 songs.
Some of which are still with us today, in the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon, offering timeless insights into life, leadership, and faith. Can you imagine writing that much?
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? But beyond his writing, Solomon is probably best known for an incredible building project, the magnificent temple in Jerusalem. This was meant to be a permanent dwelling place for God, a symbol of Israel's faith and unity. It was truly an awe-inspiring structure.
Okay, but the temple wasn't just any old building, right? What made it so special? Is it just its size?
Well, the sources describe it as an architectural marvel. They talk about its immense size, the precious materials used in its construction, think gold, cedar wood, and fine stones. But what's truly fascinating is that the temple was built on Mount Moriah. Do you recall why that location is so significant?
Wait a minute. Mount Moriah, isn't that where Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac? Talk about a place loaded with symbolic meaning.
It's exactly. It's also where King David Solomon's father purchased land after a moment of serious moral failing. So this location is already layered with stories of faith, sacrifice, and redemption before the first stone of the temple is even laid. And in his prayer of dedication, Solomon acknowledges that no building, no matter how grand, can truly contain God.
So what was his thinking behind building the temple? If he knew that, why go through all that effort?
It's a good question. He saw the temple as a focal point for prayer, a powerful symbol of God's presence among his people. It was a testament to his wisdom and devotion. But as we know, even the wisest leaders can make choices that have unintended consequences.
And that brings us to the darker side of Solomon's story, right? We have this king at the peak of his power, blessed with wisdom, responsible for this amazing temple. You'd think it's all smooth sailing from here, but it's not quite the happily ever after you might expect.
Not at all. This is where a deep dive takes a turn. Solomon makes some decisions that seem savvy on the surface, but ultimately set him and his kingdom on a path of decline.
So how does a leader as wise as Solomon end up facing a downfall? I guess that's what we're about to find out.
It all starts with a series of decisions that, at first glance, seem like clever political moves. Solomon, like many rulers of his time, wanted to make his kingdom stronger through marriage alliances.
Right.
So he marries many foreign princesses, a pretty common practice for kings trying to, build relationships, keep the peace.
Okay, so marrying for political gain, not exactly a new concept. It's been happening for centuries, right? But what's the issue with Solomon's marriages specifically?
Well, these marriages were a direct violation of God's commands to the Israelites. They were supposed to be a people set apart with a unique relationship with God. Marrying people who worshipped other gods was a huge taboo. It was seen as a threat to their faith and identity.
So even someone as wise as Solomon could be tempted by the allure of power and influence, but did it stop at the marriages? Did these foreign wives end up influencing his religious beliefs?
Sadly, yes. To keep his wives happy, Solomon allows the worship of foreign deities within his kingdom, and this is where things get really complicated. Imagine a kingdom founded on the belief in one true God, suddenly embracing a whole pantheon of gods and goddesses.
That must have created a lot of tension, right? It seems like a huge shift from the idea of religious exclusivism, the belief that there's only one true God, to a form of religious pluralism where multiple faiths are acknowledged.
Exactly. And this shift went against the core of Israel's beliefs. It raises a fascinating question that scholars still debate today. Was Solomon actually a polytheist? Meaning, did he believe in all these different gods, or did he see them as lesser beings still subordinate to the God of Israel? It's hard to say for sure.
It's incredible how, even with all our modern analysis, we're still trying to figure out the motivations of a king who lived thousands of years ago. But what about the consequences of Solomon's actions? There had to be some fallout from this, right? Absolutely. This deviation from God's commands had some serious repercussions. According to the source material, God warned Solomon that his disobedience will lead to the division and eventual downfall of the kingdom.
So the seeds of future conflict are being sown right here during Solomon's reign. That's a pretty sobering thought, that even a leader known for his wisdom could make choices with such far-reaching consequences. It makes you wonder if in his later years he regretted those choices.
That's something we can only speculate about, but it definitely reinforces the idea that wisdom, power, even good intentions can be corrupted when we compromise our values. Solomon's story shows that even those who are blessed with extraordinary gifts can fall prey to temptation and end up on a path they never intended to take.
And it makes you think about our own lives, doesn't it? Are we making compromises that could lead us away from our values and goals? Are we aware of the potential long-term consequences of our choices? These are important questions for all of us to consider, no matter what our role is in life. So we've been tracing this fascinating arc of King Solomon's life, from being granted wisdom by God to building the glorious temple to ultimately making choices that led him down a path of compromise.
It's a story that really makes you think, isn't it? And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important for us to consider what lessons we can learn from Solomon's experiences.
Absolutely. So for our listener, what are the key takeaways from all of this?
Well, on one level, it's a classic cautionary tale. Solomon, despite starting out so strong in his commitment to God and his people, ultimately let his personal desires and political maneuvering cloud his judgment. He made choices that had a ripple effect, not just on his own life, but on the future of his entire kingdom.
It's almost tragic, isn't it? This incredibly wise king brought down by his own weaknesses. But it feels like there's a more universal message here, too, something that goes beyond just one king's story.
I agree. I think Solomon's story reminds us that even the wisest, most gifted individuals are still human. We're all susceptible to temptation, to making choices that we later regret. It's a challenge to all of us to honestly examine our own lives. What compromises are we making? Are we staying true to our values, or are we letting external pressures dictate our decisions?
You know, it's easy to get swept up in the everyday demands of life, work relationships, trying to achieve our goals. It's easy to lose sight of that inner compass. Solomon's story is a reminder that even seemingly small compromises can have a cumulative effect, leading us down a path we didn't intend to travel.
It's a great point. It's like that saying, a single snowflake is of little consequence, but a whole avalanche is made up of individual snowflakes. Solomon's story reminds us that our individual choices do matter, not just for ourselves, but potentially for those around us.
And it also highlights that age-old tension between religious exclusivism and pluralism, a question that societies are still grappling with today. How do we navigate a world of diverse beliefs and perspectives while also staying true to our own convictions?
It's a complex issue with no easy answers. It requires us to be both open-minded and discerning, to engage thoughtfully with different viewpoints, while also holding fast to what we believe to be true.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the life of King Solomon, it's clear that his story isn't just some ancient tale. It's a timeless reflection on human nature, the challenges of leadership, and the complexities of faith.
And perhaps it leaves us with this final thought-provoking question. What choices can we make today to ensure that our own legacy, both individually and collectively, is built on wisdom, integrity, and a steadfast commitment to the values we hold dear?
Food for thought indeed. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the life and times of King Solomon. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.